Hello, I'm Nigel Crowther. I'm going to talk to you about Cloud Pak for business automation, and with particular reference to a real-life scenario, which is to do with healthcare assessments for a UK healthcare company. So the pain points in this company are that the healthcare evaluations are inconsistent. So some clinicians will provide different outcomes or drugs to other clinicians. There's low patient satisfaction as the patients are not getting their healthcare reports in a timely way. There's difficulty in approving the reports. So once the healthcare reports have been created, doctors need to add a prescription to this report to, say, remediate high blood pressure, and then this needs to be approved by a senior doctor. So this workflow is currently manual, and the company needs to find a way of automating the workflow to improve efficiency. And there's also lack of governance in who is approving what healthcare documents. So the need for some sort of content management system. The Cloud Pak for automation has a number of components which can help in this solution. First off is BAW or workflow. So BAW will improve the process by automating certain aspects of it, such as handoff of documents and integration to pick up key information of the patient. ODM will be used to automatically assess the patient given the patient data. So, for example, ODM rules could be written to look at blood pressure and body mass index to determine whether the patient needs medical treatment. RPA is used to access a legacy system. So in this particular scenario, the system was called System 1, and it was, even though it had APIs, they were additional cost, and the company didn't have access to these APIs, so we'd have to go in through the existing user interface to access patient information. Fourthly, there's content services or content navigator, and we'll be using this to store the healthcare reports once it's been created by BAW, and for the doctors to annotate and augment these reports with comments and also prescriptions, medical prescriptions if necessary. And we'll also use Content Navigator to implement a simple workflow so that the reports of medication can then get approved by senior doctors before being passed on to the patient. And finally, BAI or monitoring. We can use this to monitor the speed of delivery of health assessments for end to end, from when the patient comes in for an assessment to them receiving the report. And in particular, we can analyze the time clinicians spend creating the health assessment itself and how much time is saved when we replace it with straight-through processing using business rules to create the assessments. And finally, just one other value point. By running the solution on SaaS, we will save the company on infrastructure costs and also on installation costs and even maintenance costs. Call to action for the customer. So we, IBM, will offer a free SaaS trial of all these components, and we will also offer a free 2-day discovery workshop to dive into the solution and perhaps even prototype some certain aspects of the solution to prove the technology. And finally, we'll also do a technical deep dive with the development teams or architecture teams of the customer to prove the value of the technology. So let's get started with first of all the use case, which is manual health assessment. So in this particular scenario, I've designed two flows within BlueWorks Live. The first has a manual step to evaluate health assessments. So a doctor or a clinician will look at a patient's health data and determine whether they have high blood pressure and obesity. And the first stage, this will be a manual step. And in the second stage, I will automate this using ODM. But first, let's look at the manual steps. So you can see here, a nurse will perform a health assessment on a patient, so take blood pressure and also pulse rate, and use calipers for measuring fat content and also weight. And if the health's okay, rudiment check, then the process ends. Otherwise, the nurse will move on to a form which she'll fill in, and this will be an online form triggered by a BAW coach, which will allow the nurse to enter information into the system regarding the patient's health information. This will then trigger a BAW process. The first thing it will do is call RPA to invoke a legacy system called System 1, and this is based on the UK NHS medical record system. And this system has no API, so the only way into that is through a website. So the RPA will invoke the website, pass in the patient's NHS number to extract additional health information. All this information will then be fed into a report generator, and this again is using RPA's reporting facilities to do that. And once it's done that, the report will be uploaded to Content Navigator, where the health report can be managed by doctors, and in particular there will be a flow created within Content Navigator for the doctors to add prescription information and also approve it by a senior doctor before sending it to the patient. And then that's the end. Let's see this in action. So I'm going to trigger this process first of all just within the BAW designer, although in reality this will be running in the process portal, which is the runtime environment. But for here I'm just showing you the debugging steps. So the first stage is for the nurse to enter the patient information. So we see here we just add some random information about the patient called Malcolm Sanders, his doctor, birth date, address and phone number. And then when that's done, the RPA will be invoked via BAW. This will, like I said, invoke a System 1 record, which will extract additional information, health information about the patient. And once that's done, we see here we have a manual step here, assessment approval. And this will be performed by a clinician or a doctor. And the doctor will examine the information that's been extracted from the System 1 and make an assessment as to their hypertension risk or blood pressure risk, and also the body mass or weight risk. And in this case, you can see the patient's quite overweight, so the doctor will put in a comment that this guy's obese and should go on a weight loss program. And then he approves the assessment. And then this moves on to the Create Health Report, which will invoke RPA again to create a PDF health report. And then the final stage here is that it's uploaded to Content Navigator. Now this is using the APIs of Content Navigator, GraphQL APIs. And you can see here we've uploaded the patient, and we can now click on it to view the information. I'm only going to briefly talk about Navigator here, as I'll talk about it in more detail in the next steps. So you can see here is the health assessment created by RPA, and you have the blood pressure chart with X where the risk area is, and also the body mass index chart. Okay, so now we're going to extend this first use case to have straight through processing. So what that means is, instead of using the clinician or doctor to evaluate the health assessment, we're going to use business rules to automatically do this without the need of human intervention. So the advantage of this is that we're going to speed up the process, we're going to save time, we're going to save money, because the doctor will no longer be needed for this health evaluation. So you can see here in this BlueWorks Live diagram, we have the same process as before, but the only difference is that this line which was clinician has now been replaced with ODM. So ODM is now fully automatically creating the health recommendations. In other words, looking at the body mass index and also the blood pressure to determine what outcome there should be regarding a follow-up to the patient. Let's now look at the rules behind this. So you see here we've created a rule flow with decision center. So we're using the DMN rule flow within ODM, and you can see here we have two separate decisions. So we have, in green is the parameters coming into the rules, and the blue indicates the decision logic. And the decision logic will contain either decision tables or action rules, which I'll explain in a minute. So we just click on edit, and then we're editing the evaluate body mass decision logic. And you can see here there's one table in here which evaluates the body mass given the BMI. So for example, if the body mass is between 30 and 35, we'll classify that as obese class 1. And what we're going to do here is just make a simple change. We're going to change the name of the table and also just change the obese class 2 from 40 to 39 as the maximum value. And then we'll save the change and then create a test. So now what I'm going to do is put in a BMI of 39 to check that it's now catching the obese class 3 category, which it does. So now I'm going to save this just to say what changes I've made, which to change the BMI table. I'm going to create a new version, and then I'm going to make a comparison between the old and new version after I've deployed it. So it's deployed now, and then I'm going to make a comparison. Compare the current version with the previous version. Press compare, and you can see here if I click on the main rule set, you can see here, hover over evaluate body mass, you can see that it's identified the changes I've made. Now I'm just going to verify it within the rule execution server, which is the runtime environment. I'm going to click on the decision service, and this time I'm going to test it within the execution server test tool using a real JSON payload. So this is slightly more technical, but this will actually allow me to test the actual runtime environment to make sure the runtime is working. And you can see here, passing in some values and then pressing execute request, and I'm getting the expected results. So now what we're going to do is plug in these rules into the original BAW flow to replace the manual assessment performed by the doctor. So you can see here in this flow, we now have just the triggering of the assessment is done manually, and the straight through processing for the rest of it. So the data enrichment part, which is where the assessment was performed manually, is now being performed by the rules. So in this step, ODM is being called to evaluate the health, and then adding that to the report, and then finally the report is being created, and then it's being uploaded to Content Navigator. So let's just see this run again. So I'm going to first of all trigger the assessment, add some fictitious patient information, and then when that's done, I'm going to let it run, and you can see on the right there it's calling extract patient data. It's calling RPA to get the additional information about the patient, and then it's moving on to the data enrichment step to call out to ODM to automatically evaluate the health data. So, and this step now we're going to show you how we use BAI dashboards to see how much savings we're making by having straight through processing. So the first dashboard in week 1, we assume we're running without straight through processing. So in other words, using the manual step. And you can see here, we used 130 hours to process the reports. And then you can see in week 2, the reports now only using 64 minutes of manual time to process the report required per week. Finally, I'm going to talk about Content Navigator, which is a tool to allow you to manage and orchestrate the health reports in a secure environment. So in this scenario, we've uploaded the health reports to Content Navigator, and the doctors will have access to these reports, and it's up to the doctor to analyze these reports, add the prescription if necessary, and then get it approved by the senior doctor before it's sent to the customer. So we're going to enter Navigator now, and we're going to move to the team space and open up health assessments. And you can see here there's 2 folders, one for patients under review and one for patients that have been reviewed. So in this case, we're going to open up a patient which has not been reviewed, in this case Dean Growers, and then we're going to start a workflow trigger a workflow. So this would be done by, say, a junior doctor to trigger the workflow to get the health assessment approved by a doctor, and for another doctor to add the prescription information to the report. So I'm going to assign it to a doctor, and then give a due date, and then launch the workflow. And then we're going to simulate now the doctor coming in into his inbox to see what reports need reviewing. He's going to open up the document for this patient, and in here will be the report. And you can see here this patient has very high blood pressure, so the doctor's going to prescribe medication for this. So first of all, he'll just annotate the document to give the key information that's needed for the prescription, and then he's going to redact certain information which he doesn't want seen by other doctors, in this case the date of birth, and he's going to add the prescription information, and then finally he's going to approve this by just using the timestamp and approval stamp, and then stamp it on there, and then he'll press save. So this document is now saved and versioned, and he's finally going to add a comment about the prescription, and then you can see here the history of the document. So now finally the senior doctor will come in and see that the patient has been reviewed, and he'll say he's happy with that and complete the workflow. So now the form and prescription are ready to be sent to the patient. This concludes my demonstration of using Cloud Pak for business automation and applying it against the healthcare assessment use case. Thank you for watching.